Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hidden Existence. Hope everybody's doing all right out there tonight. And it is, of course, the start of the 12 days of Christmas, a long 12 days for me. But I'm up for it. I'm ready for it. Kerry and I, of course, have done it for the last 2 years over on Bigfoot Odyssey, and I really wanted to organise one again for this year and hopefully get us into the spirit of Christmas, whatever that might mean to people. But it could be it should be a. Oh, is that my volume? Sorry about that. I never do that. I've done that now. But anyway, my guest tonight, coming from Staten Island, I've got Jason Stroming. How are you doing, Jason?
Good. How are you, Daniela?
Doing very well, thank you. You are the
Good.
creator of Odd and Untold. You've got a channel on YouTube talking about paranormal and all sorts of experiences, fringe subjects to many people, but to us, they're fascinating. And don't know why they're fringe at all, because lots of people experience these things throughout their lives, oddities. And I'm looking forward to listening to hearing about some of your experiences. And how did you get into doing this? How did you end up coming on, getting a channel and wanting to speak out about it?
So it's a bit of a long story. I used to have a blog called The Occult Section, and I've been running that since 2010. And that was just a blog, and I would do movie reviews, book reviews, all based on the paranormal. Because here in the bookstores, the UFO books and Bigfoot books, they were all lumped into the paranormal, the occult section, and then that became like the New Age section and in bookstores. So it really started off as like a book review site, and we would comment on news articles. So anything Bigfoot, UFO, like you said, fringe, Bigfoot, UFOs, ghost stories, Loch Ness Monster, cryptids, serial killers, anything that was just kind of odd, unusual. And I had run that for many years, and the site really took a hit from some Google algorithms, and there were some plugins on the site that took me off Google, like no indexed all my pages. It was like a real nightmare. So I spent probably the better part of a year trying to fix things so that Google did not punish me, and fix my algorithm. And it really wasn't working. And my traffic dropped from probably like 25,000 hits a month to like 800 a month. It was like really ridiculous. And my wife had said, you know what, maybe it's time for like a revamp, change with the times. Everything now is about Instagram and TikTok and YouTube and podcasting. So she recommended that. And so, yeah, I changed the name, and because we needed a name change. We were another thing I was finding out was that we were being blocked in a lot of places for the word occult.
Okay, yeah.
So anybody at university, anybody at school, a lot of people at work, like they would try to click on my link and it would be blocked by the work firewall and say, I guess because of the word occult. And so I said, let me do a name change. Let me shift focus. And to piggyback on what you were sort of saying a little earlier about these fringe topics that really shouldn't be fringe, I wanted to sort of showcase the fact that so many people have had weird experiences, and we can call them paranormal or supernatural or whatever, but being in this world of I was a paranormal investigator, I was a blogger, I've just always been around the paranormal, and it always struck me how many people have stories, people that you would never expect, people who hide it from you, who will laugh about it publicly, but once they find out that that's what you do, that that's what you're interested in, they'll kind of pull you aside and say, hey, can I tell you my story? So that's why I found, I changed it to Odd and Untold. So it's all odd stories. And I really wanted to focus on the untold stories. I didn't want to rehash popular stories. I mean, there are people out there doing it better than I am, that I could ever do it, and I love stories like the Patterson-Gimlin footage, but what can I add to that story that hasn't already been said? So for me, it was really about giving people a voice to share their experiences, their stories, the untold stories, just the average layperson's story. And I had coworkers, I had friends, I had family who over the years have sort of confided in me about their stories, and some of them have been willing to come on the podcast. Some of them are still kind of iffy because it's a nerve-wracking sort of thing to go out and publicly tell your story. But I wanted to give people that that outlet, without judgment, to just sort of say, tell your story as you experienced it, and let the audience decide. So that's really what brought me to Odd and Untold.
Yeah, well, that's great, isn't it? Is to provide that platform, to be an ear for people as well. Like you say, I think everybody experiences something. It may not be paranormal, but people have memories. There's something that always sticks in somebody's head, in some episode that sticks in your head. I had something as a young girl, never forgot it. Pretty sure I wasn't dreaming or asleep. I think if it was a dream, I would have forgotten it by now. It was many years ago. But this thing, I saw something stood by the side of my bed, convinced it was real. I remember it to this day, exactly what happened. So, yeah, there's lots of people out there, and like you say, you only need to ask somebody, and they go, "Oh yeah, something happened to me," and it's interesting, isn't it? And a bit like the Bigfoot thing, too many people are experiencing something, so there has to be something out there, something happening. What it is, I don't know if we'll ever find out. But personally, for you, what experiences have you had?
I've had I've had a number of weird things happen to me over the years, and I'm always very hesitant to sort of say that it was paranormal or supernatural. I always just sort of say, like, I couldn't explain what happened to me. So I don't know where you want me to start. I can start with some Bigfoot experiences that I think I may have had.
Yeah, we
Um,
can have a mix of things.
sure. So um, two experiences I had, both in New York, upstate New York. One was in 2015, and my wife and I were staying in a little cabin Airbnb up in the Hudson River Valley, and we had been there before. We had gone back. The first time I was there, I was on the phone with my son, sort of saying goodnight right around twilight, and there was this ridge behind the cabin and a little stream at the bottom of it. So really beautiful, just this little stream and then a ridge and trees. And I heard what sounded like tree knocks, and just the clear sound of just two knocks. And I look up on the ridge because that's where the sound had come from, and I saw like a shadow of something. I can't say what I saw. Again, I will not say that these are definitive Bigfoot experiences, but I saw something kind of moving, and I just chalked it up to, uh, maybe branches breaking, and maybe I saw a bear or a deer, just because I couldn't really see. And I tend to take, I mean, as much as I believe in this stuff, I do tend to take a more skeptical approach, and I don't really ever jump to conclusions. So a couple months later, we went back to the cabin because we liked it so much. So this would have been like October of the same year. The first thing happened, I believe, in August. And it was a Sunday night. My wife and I went out to like a local Applebee's to watch the football game and have some dinner. And then afterwards, we stopped off, got some snacks, and went back to the cabin. And the cabin was very rustic. I mean, it was a bed, a couple of nightstands, and a couple of lamps. And there was no TV. There was nothing in there. But it was a beautiful autumn night. So we had the screen door open to the woods, and we're just kind of listening to the stream and the running water and the crickets. And probably a little bit after midnight, we just heard this really alarming howl coming from the ridge. And it sounded just very low and guttural, almost like gorilla aggression, just ooh, 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 like that. And then it rose slowly but steadily to this like monkey chatter, almost as like, that screeching that you hear if you go to like a zoo and the monkey house and the monkeys are just kind of, getting excited.
Yeah.
And it was like reverberating in our chests. And again, this is all happening within like seconds, but like my wife and I look at each other, we jump up, we're trying to like open our phones to get like, to record this. Of course, by the time we did, the howls had stopped. And she grew up in central Massachusetts. She grew up like on, a little mountain, and she had coyotes and all sorts of wildlife and owls. And we couldn't figure out what it was. It was loud and it was big. and it sounded like apes. It sounded like more than one. And again,
Oh,
we couldn't figure out if it was just the echo coming from the ridge and bouncing down, but it sounded like two or more, and it was just this ape-like sound. And we asked the owner the next morning when we ran into her and said, do you guys have any like weird animals out here or sounds? And she's like, no. She's like, um, nothing that really makes any noise. We don't even have coyotes really. So it was just this very strange thing. And we had pulled up our phones that night. We're trying to Google like animals of New York State, and what could this be? Could it be a fisher? Could it be a bobcat? Could it be coyotes? Could it be a bear? Nothing matched. And again, just the fact that it kind of hit us in the chest, like it was so bassy,
strong. Whatever it
very
was.
strong, very
Powerful. Yeah.
powerful, and it just shook us. And again, my wife is even more pragmatic and skeptical than I am. So for her to be that scared and kind of being like, "What was that?"
That's
And
interesting.
again, some of the we kind of talked to some of the locals the next day as well as the owner, and everybody was saying, "Oh, you probably heard a barred owl," and I was like, "No, I've heard I've heard barred owls, and this was no like unless this owl was 8 feet tall and 500 pounds, this was not an owl. I don't know what it was. I'm not going to say it was Bigfoot, but it was just way too loud."
I think you can definitely kind of narrow it down to some things, can't you? And definitely knock some things off the list. Even though some animals have many calls and noises, like you say, that strength, that you feel it, that it's something strong, kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else can it be?
Yeah, and that's what it is, and again, like I mentioned, fishers, I mentioned foxes can make like really blood curdling sounds. It can sound like a woman being murdered. It can, like screaming or babies crying, like really unearthly sounds, but they're just natural. But they don't have that bassiness to them. They're much more high pitched, and they sound like screams rather than. I mean, this sounded like King Kong was, 100 yards from our cabin. It just
Mm,
shook us. It was loud, and yeah, I'm not going to say it was Bigfoot because I didn't see an actual Bigfoot making the sound, so I can't say for sure. But process of elimination, you start saying, "What did I hear?" And it just makes me wonder a little bit more about like what was actually out there,
mm,
because it wasn't people. There's nobody. There's nobody back there. It's just up on this ridge, and it's a Sunday night in this little sleepy town in New York, in the Hudson Valley. Very, very strange experience, and that was back in 2015.
wow.
Um,
I wonder how many kind of properties like that get trouble, and these landlords find it difficult to rent them out, and have had to do something else. I'm imagining that could go on somewhere, or have that kind of trouble somewhere. And what do you do?
Yeah, and it's funny because you go upstate New York and you don't hear a lot of Bigfoot story as much as you would like in the Pacific Northwest or other places perhaps, but there's a lot of like those Bigfoot silhouette cutouts that people put on like the side of their barns or the side of their sheds, and it's just you drive through and there's no Bigfoot store or Bigfoot diner, but there's just these silhouettes everywhere. And it was funny. I was having some work done in my house, and this guy was over replacing our hot water heater, and I had a cup on the kitchen counter, and it had like that little Bigfoot silhouette on it because I have lots of Bigfoot cups. And he said he goes up there to do like snowboarding and snowmobiling and stuff, and he was saying like because they'll go at like 2 a.m. in the woods and they'll come out on someone's property and the headlights will kind of hit one of these silhouettes. And he said like his heart would skip a beat because for a split second, he's thinking he's seeing an actual Bigfoot and it's really just one of these guys with a silhouette on their barn.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're so prevalent up there and it just makes you wonder because a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but there's so many of these like very subtle signs that people may have seen something or are interested in it. So I always found that interesting.
Definitely. What do you feel about Bigfoot? I mean, what's your? I know you don't know. None of us know. But what's your feeling about this creature? Does it just want to be left alone, or why is it popping up in front of people?
That's a great question. And I mean, personally, I feel like they're probably just an undiscovered primate, flesh and blood. Uh, and I don't disrespect anybody who has a different belief than me. None of us know. So it really just comes down to personal theories. But yeah, why do they sometimes seemingly like show themselves? Like, why did I hear that scream? And I have another story I can tell you as well, which is a little bit weird. But you hear about these roadside crossings. If these things are supposed to be intelligent and ninjas of the woods, and if they see a car coming and headlights, why do they dart out right before they're about to get hit? I understand deer doing that, or squirrels. They're not very bright, but you have this bipedal primate out there allegedly. Why is it crossing? And so many people claim to see this, and I'm not saying that they're wrong. It's just it's one of those mysteries of like, why would something that is allegedly so smart act so dumb and just be like, hey, here I am, just catch me in your headlights as I run across the road at night.
Yeah.
On 2 feet, and I'm clearly I'm clearly 8 feet tall and covered in hair, and it's weird. So not sure what to make of that.
It's definitely strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
'Cause I always think, they must take people from a mile off, or a car from ages off, or at least, picking up the sounds, and they can just move away from people if they wanted to. I'm pretty sure, mind you, they're not, perfect, are they? I'm sure they get distracted by things and stuff going on around them, but they have this, seem to have an upper hand on intelligence with other creatures. I often wonder, what are the ones like in, places where people are really not going, in those deep woods that are just not, nowhere near anywhere, and how they would react to a human, as opposed to those that are kind of on the fringe of society, or seem to be always bumping into people. Are they a different type, or
Yeah,
would they be?
it's weird. And I mean, and that's a good segue into my other story, because I do a lot of camping up in the Adirondacks in New York, which is way upstate. Adirondack Park is huge. It's bigger than like Yosemite National Park. But it's a state park, and it's very remote, and we do a lot of remote camping. We don't like being around people. And I've said this on my show before too, that like we've gone camping many times, and we have yet to see a single deer. Like, we've seen tracks in the mud, we've seen tracks down by the water, but we've never seen a single deer. We've never seen a bear. I mean, we've seen squirrels. That's pretty much the biggest animal we've seen. So like you were saying, these things, you'd think they would hear people coming. You'd think they would have that sense like deers do, or other animals, to avoid human beings. Like, we're kind of just trudging through the woods with our backpacks on, and we're clinking and clanging, and we've never seen a deer, not once. We've seen tracks. So that'll go into my second story, which again, I'm not going to say it was definitely Bigfoot, but it was a weird experience where my friend Josh and I, who I camp with up in the Adirondacks, we went very deep one time. It was like the deepest we've ever gone. I mean, where we parked the car was probably half an hour from the closest town. And then we hiked a little over 3 miles to this pond that was way back. We didn't see anybody on the trail. There was nobody there. We're kind of walking through cobwebs on the trail. Like, we could tell nobody had been there in a long time. First night, nothing happens. Second night, we're just sitting around the campfire. It just got dark, so probably about a little after 8. And his dog was with us. It was the only camping trip we didn't bring guns on. And we always bring guns just for safety. This is the only trip we never brought guns. And the dog is just kind of looking off into the woods, like it hears something. And a few minutes later, we hear something very large coming in, and just kind of branches breaking. And it's clearly not being subtle or trying to sneak up on us. It's making a ton of noise. And so we stand up. We're thinking it's a bear. And we grab our knives. We had some sticks that we had sharpened to hold up our tarps, and we're standing up, and Josh and I are both about 6'1", and Josh is telling me I see the eye shine. It's looking right at us. And he says, it's about my height. I'm like eye level with it. And what Josh didn't realize at the time was the tree he was pointing at, because he's like, and the angle I couldn't see the eye shine, but he's pointing to this tree with his flashlight. And the tree was down in a ravine. So this thing is looking at us from behind the tree. It's kind of peeking out. And Josh is like, it's probably a bear standing up because it's about 6 feet tall. And I'm like, that tree is down in a ravine. If that's behind the tree, it's got to be about 8-9 feet tall. And we're yelling at it, and the dog is just not moving. And this is like a 200-pound German Shepherd, big dog. And the dog is just looking at it, scared. And we're yelling, and it's not moving off. And black bear, that's the biggest thing we have in the Adirondacks, really, is black bear. And they don't get that big. Again, standing up, they're maybe about 5-6 feet tall. And usually they run off. They're like dogs, you yell at them and they run out. But we were so deep in, and we were like, if this thing attacks us, whatever it is, bear or whatever, we're like 3 miles from the car, and it's dark, and there's nobody else around. There's no campsite. So it hung out probably for 7-8 minutes, just watching us, kind of like peeking out from behind the tree, looking at us, going back behind the tree. And we're yelling and we're screaming. And finally it just walks off very slowly, just like it had not a care in the world. And so that night we're leaving in the morning. We said, look, if this is a bear, we're going to put the cooler over where it walked through, because let it have the sausages. Like, we just don't want it coming near the tents, because this thing clearly was not afraid of us. So we did that. We were up most of the night. It was hard sleeping that night.
Oh.
And next morning, the cooler hadn't been touched. And we did a little video, and I was like, show me exactly where this tree is. And Josh forgot, he didn't realize there was a ravine there. So the next morning I'm showing him, and I'm like, there's the tree. And I'm like raising my arm, and I'm like, tell me where you saw the eyes. And like, I'm 6'1". I put my hand all the way up, and like the tip of my fingertips, he was like, that's where the eyes were.
Wow.
So we were like, okay, either this is the biggest black bear ever, or it climbed the tree, which we didn't hear anything. We heard steps, and then we're seeing eye shine. There was no sound of claws on a tree. We didn't see the arms wrapped around the tree. We could see the tree, but it was just this weird eye shine. And if it was where Josh saw it, it had at least been, our estimates is like 8.5 feet tall.
That's tall, isn't it? It's so tall, enough, isn't it? A couple of things there is, what creature kind of just hangs around peeking behind a tree? Would a bear really bother doing that? Are there many creatures? They tend to just go, don't they? If there's someone around and they don't want to go near, for me, that's kind of makes me wonder. Stuff that hangs around is curious.
And that's what really bothered us about it. Because again, you go to the Adirondacks, you don't hear of bear attacks. And people will tell you, bears will come in and bother you. They usually come in after everyone's asleep. They're scavengers. They kind of come into the camp. They want to see that you drop a piece of hot dog. Did you leave your cooler out? And typically, if you yell and make yourself very big, they run off. Because like I said, they're kind of like dogs. They're used to people up there. They don't typically approach people. And like I said, Josh and I are both big guys. We're both 6'1", and we're yelling and stomping our sticks, and we have a dog with us. So now there's 3 other animals here that are 200 pounds plus. And this creature is just staring us down and would not back off. And even when it did leave, it just kind of sauntered out. You could hear footstep, very slowly, just very casual. Like he came in, checked us out. It's like, oh, what are you guys up to? We yelled a lot, and it didn't get scared. And then eventually, when it decided to, it just kept on walking, and we didn't hear it for the rest of the night, and it didn't touch our cooler. So we were figuring, if it's a bear, it'll come back. It'll, and we had like chili dogs in there, and eggs and cheese and a couple of steaks. Like, this bear could have had a feast, and it was not touched. We brought all the food back with us, and just a very weird experience. And again, I can't say it was Bigfoot for sure, but you start eliminating things. And Josh had mentioned maybe it's a moose, because they do have moose up there, and a moose its eyes could be very, it could be 7, 8 feet tall. But I did some research, and everything said that moose are not really nocturnal, that they have the same vision as like a human being. So they can't really maneuver at night. They would just be tripping. And, it's like one of us walking around the deep woods without a flashlight in the pitch
Yeah.
black. Like we would just not be able to see. So it could have been a moose. It could have been a very large bear. I just,
A moose that couldn't sleep or something maybe, or, got stuck because it didn't know where else to go. But yeah, it does limit what this thing could have been. Another thing I picked up on is that you often hear accounts where these things just don't even acknowledge you. They're just carrying on what they're doing. They couldn't care less if you were stood there or not. I've heard of quite a few accounts like that. Like this thing didn't care that they were there.
yeah. And it was clearly looking at us. But we're yelling. And again, we're big guys with big booming voices, and we're just like, get, and yelling, and it's echoing, through the woods as sound does. And there was a pond behind, a very small lake, but it's echoing off the water, and it's making loud sounds. And this thing just, it didn't get startled. It didn't, you yell at a deer, it's going to run out, and this thing just kept looking at us. And again, when we did our investigation the next morning, because I knew this was down in a ravine, and the next morning I said, dude, tell me where this was. And he pointed to the tree and said it was like behind this tree. And I'm like, well, this tree is down like an embankment. So if it was by this tree and it's eye level with us and we're 6 feet tall, you got to add another 2 or 3 feet because it's kind of down and peeking at us over like a ridge. Again, I can't say for sure it was Bigfoot, but it was definitely a weird and scary encounter, because we were just like, if this is a bear or whatever it is, if it attacks us, we have, no gun. And even if one of us gets hurt, that's a long trip back to the car to go get help. And, no cell phone service out there. There's no calling for help.
No.
And it took us probably about 3 hours in the daylight to get to the site. So you got to figure in the dark. Like just getting back to the car a healthy person getting back to the car would have been 5 hours probably. So very, very strange experience for us.
Yeah. And I guess you wouldn't sleep a lot, would you, when
No.
things like that are happening? But fascinating, isn't it? I mean, just this creature, so different to other creatures. I mean, I know, like you say, bears will come through, scavenge, they'll see what's about. I don't know if Bigfoot ever does that. I know I've heard it walks through camps. People have heard it walking past the tent, but maybe not being scavengers like that. It's just, I don't know. It's such a weird creature. Obviously, I wish we all had the answers, but its
Yeah. And
behavior is very strange.
it was just so weird because it was literally just as it got dark. I mean, it was just at the point where there was like no light left in the sky. We had the fire going. We were just about to kind of sit down and relax for the evening and crack a beer. And again, up there, the bears, they'll come out real late. They'll come out 2 a.m, 3 a.m, and kind of scavenge, but they don't generally approach people who are kind of laughing and talking loudly. I mean, again, we're big guys. We're kind of talking. We got the dog there and we're playing with the dog and, going through our snacks. And so it was just weird that like as soon as it got dark, this thing kind of came into camp and stared us down, despite our yelling and hooting and hollering, and then just was like, okay, I'm going to leave. You guys are okay. You're no threat.
Yeah. Did what it wanted to do, and that was all it wanted to do, wasn't it? Obviously. Just going to say hello to Bill Tucker. How you doing, Bill? I'm going to be in touch with you, Bill, pretty soon. Be good to catch up. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined tonight, who's joined with the memberships. Really appreciate that, and you guys being here. So let's kind of cross the what we say. I know people don't like this word. I don't know what else to use. The kind of woo side of Bigfoot. When you hear accounts about them disappearing or making that big noise, and yet you don't see them. These tracks that just disappear halfway. I mean, what do you think about those kind of accounts?
Those always baffle me because, as I said earlier, I'm kind of in the flesh and blood camp that this is just an undiscovered primate. But those types of stories bother me because you do hear these stories of people following a long set of tracks, and it'll go out into the middle of a field and just stop. And a person couldn't do that if they were hoaxing it, like, because where did they go? So it's almost like, did somebody, charter a helicopter to come in and hoax these tracks and then lift them up? And uh, it's just weird. And again, you hear accounts of people shooting them and they say, oh, I hit it and the thing screamed and it ran away. And okay, but then you have a lot of other people who say, I shot this thing at point blank range and it
Did nothing.
did nothing. Like,
Yeah.
it was like the bullet just passed right through it or just bounced off of it, or so there's these weird stories out there, and I don't know what to make of them. I really don't. Because for every strange story like that of it disappearing, of it not being hurt by bullets, there's also stories of it down by a river, scooping water into its mouth and drinking, or pulling a fish, or
Breaking a deer's neck, it's
yeah,
why they're sustaining themselves. I mean, obviously, I don't know how quantum physics and all that works, if that's what it's about. But it is just a strange
it
thing
really
that's attached to it. Same with orbs, lights, UFOs, all these little sightings. Are they just coincidences happening at the same time, or are they connected?
Yeah, because you would think something that can come from another dimension, jump through a portal, whether it's another dimension, whether they're being dropped off by extraterrestrials and UFOs, which some people believe. Why is it then, snapping a deer's neck and carrying it out, or grabbing a fish out of the stream, or drinking water? Like, it seems to have this sort of these biological needs that we have for food and water and shelter. People say they see tree structures or nests. So on the one hand, you have this very sort of biological creature. And another thing I've mentioned on the show too is that, like, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, like different types of Bigfoot, and they're very different in the Pacific Northwest versus down in the South versus up in New York State. And it seems to be that they're adapted for their environment. So up in the Pacific Northwest, they're very bulky and muscular, and down south they're very sort of thin and they're smaller and they're quicker. They're not this big hulking thing. They're very fast and skinny sort of creatures. So why are there different biological types in appropriate environments, but yet people, like you said, like they see orbs, they still see weird lights associated with Bigfoot, or the tracks that just disappear? Where did this thing go? So it's I don't think anybody knows the answer for sure.
No, I mean, I don't know the answer. I mean, it's something I think about is maybe there's, other worlds like ours out there, and with the same environment, same setup, and that's why they can adapt to wherever they if this is what they do. I mean, I'm completely making this up, but I'm trying to think of, like, how can an alien, if it is an alien, anything that's coming from somewhere else is alien, I guess.
Right.
How does it fit into the environment that it goes into? How can it survive? Is it because that's how it does it everywhere else? Or there's something that turns it into what it needs to do when it's here? We don't have the answers. It's just stuff that goes on in my head all the time of, like, how does it work, Jamie, yeah, the Blue Line Bigfoots guys are up there, aren't they, in the Adirondacks? And there's always something going on up there. Oh, the White Bigfoot reports. Yeah, have you heard any report, White Bigfoot, Jason?
Yeah, and that's we've had a lot of reports in New York, and I was actually 2 weeks ago I spoke to Gail Beatty from the Bigfoot researchers of the Hudson Valley, and she was telling some stories. It's not the Adirondacks, a little bit south of the Adirondacks, but Bigfoot sightings of blondish creatures, white creatures, reddish brown hair, gray. So she said she gets reports of all different colors. And again, you wouldn't think in New York that we'd get white Bigfoot or blonde. Again, most people, you think Bigfoot, you're thinking the Patterson Gimlin, you're thinking Patty. dark hair, brown. So it is weird when you hear like blonde or white or gray or like silverback, almost like gorillas. People say it was mostly dark, but it kind of had like a white stripe down its back or a gray stripe. So very, very, very interesting that people see these variations, which again, when, skeptics will say, oh, well, Bigfoot's just on your mind. You're in the woods, you're expecting to see Bigfoot. And again, the stereotypical Bigfoot is not what people usually see. I mean, they do. They'll see the big, dark brown or black hairy creature, but you do have these reports of something that's red or something that's blonde or something that's white. And those are, they're harder to dismiss. Because if someone's just imagining a Bigfoot, why aren't they imagining the pop culture sort of version of Bigfoot? Why are they imagining a Bigfoot that, it looked just like Bigfoot, but it was white? That's
Yeah.
weird to me. And to me, it lends a little bit of credibility to the sighting, because what did they see? It's not just them wanting to see a stereotypical Bigfoot. They saw something and they're like, no, it didn't look like the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot. It didn't look like, Harry and the Hendersons. It had a very different look to it. So those always intrigue me because they're different and they're not so easily written off by the skeptics who just say, you've seen too many movies. Because you don't see white Bigfoot in the movies, not in the United States. I mean, you'll see Yetis and abominable snowmen. So yeah, that always interests me.
There's definitely sometimes something about some of those details, descriptions like red hair, but it had flecks of blonde or brown or whatever, where there's clearly multicolored.
Mm-hmm.
There's now what that is down to, I don't know. But when you think about cats that breed, and I mean, talking about pet cats, or they go out and they mate with anything, don't they? And if a cat's mated with a ginger tom or a tortoise shell, they all have these patterns, designs, colors. Who knows what's out there? How they breed? Or are they drawn to a particular type? I mean, or do they? These are just questions again. But like you say, those that are adapting, like those in the swamps, completely different environment to those in the woods. Do they ever cross over? I mean, it'd be interesting to know, of course. I wonder whether these in the swamps were originally much further inland and have had to adapt. Whether they just do that. I mean, if they've got, if they are, I'm not saying they are paranormal or woo, but I guess anything's possible then if we go into that kind of realm. But there's definitely a lot of questions, isn't there? There's a lot of things. I kind of almost think Bigfoot's a bit like a magic trick. Until you know how it's done, you're kind of in awe of it. And then once you find out how it was done, just go, is that it? And it could be that simple. We just don't know. Maybe we have hit on the answer and we'll never know.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, and that's what gets so many people interested, because there are so many unknown and unanswered questions, so many unknowns about these things, and conflicting reports. And again, clearly some of them you can sort of dismiss and say this is hogwash, this is someone hoaxing, but the majority of these reports are coming in from people with nothing to gain, everything to lose. And they're not really fantastical. It's a quick sighting. It's like I was saying earlier, something ran across the road as I was driving home from work late one night or from a party, and it was clearly bipedal and it ran across the road, and I saw it for 2 seconds and it was dark, and it's not people with these elaborate stories. So why would they make this up? Why, like you said earlier, people are seeing something, and whether you want to call it paranormal or what, it deserves further examination, because people are seeing these things and they're not seeing other things, and it's, again, the skeptics will say, you're expecting to see Bigfoot, or were you on drugs? Were you drinking? And I have plenty of friends who've done drugs. I imbibe in alcohol. I've gotten drunk a few times in my lifetime. I've never seen Bigfoot, in my living room. And out in the woods, I've never seen a dragon. I've never seen a unicorn. I've never seen mermaids in the water. So if people are hallucinating, if people are just expecting to see certain things, why aren't they seeing these other things? They're always seeing a tall bipedal man like
Mm,
creature covered in hair. It's just weird to me.
yeah. It's so ridiculous, isn't it? The drink and the drugs kind of thing, where absolutely nobody who indulges in stuff like that sees Bigfoot. We'd be have psychiatric units would be full
Oh
of
yeah.
people, just all like there'd be a Bigfoot unit. So, because people are just seeing Bigfoot through drinking alcohol and drugs. So, yeah, it's like you say, it's definitely something happening. Even those, I guess, it's about people need answers, don't they? Or at least it plays on people's mind. And that's what we've found over the years is the effects
Hmm.
that seeing these things can do to people, and especially those that have had a face to face and actually know 100% what they've seen. I think this is the sad part about this subject is um, that those people that live with these encounters, and I know we've got these platforms, and there is obviously a place for people to come to, but not everybody knows that. There's a lot of people walking around with a horrifying story that they just can't share with anybody, or don't know even where to begin sharing. And I think that's what upsets me, I guess, the most about this whole thing is people need validating. They need, to know, yes, that's what I saw. It's true.
Yeah, and for me, it's not even about fully believing them. Because if someone comes and says, "I saw something in the sky," to me, that doesn't mean you saw an alien spacecraft. From another planet. I don't know what you saw, but I will believe that you saw something that you could not explain, and that's why they're called UFOs, unidentified flying object. It's unidentified. If you're seeing something in the woods, and there's lots of people who will have experiences, and they'll tell you their weird experience, but they'll be reluctant to say, my house is haunted, or I saw a UFO. They'll just say, hey, I saw this weird thing in the sky. And they'll never say UFO, but they'll tell you this story and it sounds like a UFO. It's like all the hallmarks. But even them, they won't say I saw a UFO, because it's hard for them to accept what they saw. They're just kind of, like you said, they want to share their experience, because it's hard to hold that in when you see something, because it can be scary, just because the unknown is scary. You see something in the sky, you see something in your house, you see something in the woods. If you don't know what it is, it's scary, because you just don't know. And again, if Bigfoot is just an undiscovered animal, a primate, like, why is that scary? People will see deer in the woods, and they're not. Oh, it's just a deer, because you know what it is. Oh, it's just a black bear. If we yell, it'll run off. Okay, you don't. You learn how to live with these things. But if you have a creature you don't have any information about yet, you don't know. Is this thing going to come in and look at me and then wander off? Is it peaceful? Is it going to come in and tear me in half? Uh, we don't have studies on these things, so we don't know. And yeah, people who've seen them and have lived are all going to say, yeah, it's just going to kind of come in, it'll growl, and it'll walk off. But we don't know if people have been killed by Bigfoot. I mean, people get killed, and it's like, oh, it must have been a bear.
Yeah.
They must have run into some bad people, or some, drug runners in the woods, or whatever explanation people want to come up with.
411. 411. I mean, anything could happen to these people. I think more people would be going missing. Just me personally, if it was Bigfoot, if Bigfoot had a trait of taking people, if Bigfoot for me, if they were, knocking, pushing trees over all the time, there'd be no like trees left. If
Right.
that was like I've often thought about this, like, beavers chew wood, don't they? They have something that they do, a sign of an animal. A lot of them you can almost like tracking, not just tracks, but activity that they do. You can go, that's the deer doing that. That's what they do, or that's a rabbit or whatever. Bigfoot, I don't know what they do. I don't know what their little niche is. But I don't think it's twisting the trees and pushing them over, because I think we'd have more trees down than we should have. I don't know. It's just a thought.
No, and I fully agree with you. And I meant to bring this up earlier when I was talking about the tree knocks, because a lot of that stuff I'm sort of skeptical about, because you hear tree knocks and people, oh, they assume it has to be Bigfoot. Well, we don't know. Like you hear people reporting tree knocks, you hear people reporting howls. But if you have a group of people going into the woods into a known Bigfoot area and they're going, whoo, and then they get a response from 2 miles away, is that Bigfoot, or is that another group just like yours who knows that this is a Bigfoot hotspot? And they're thinking like, oh my God, we heard a howl. And you're thinking, oh my God, we heard a howl. And you're just kind of talking to other Bigfoot researchers. And the same thing with the tree knocks, until someone sees a Bigfoot taking a branch and knocking it against a tree, we don't know what that is. It could be just branches falling. It could be, deer clash their antlers, and that can sound like very much like wood, and tree knocks. So it for me, it's always something interesting, but it's none of it is actual proof for me, because we don't know what is making these tree knocks, what is making these howls. Like I said to you earlier, I won't say that what I heard was Bigfoot. I'm just saying it wasn't an owl, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a deer.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. It couldn't have been a human. I don't know any human who has a lung capacity, a vocal capacity that loud. It was almost like something at a concert, like when the loud music kicks in and the bass just kind of hits your chest. So I don't know, but interesting, very interesting. We just don't know their behavior other than people see them and then they kind of disappear.
We've kind of we connect them to wood. People connect them to wood, no matter what. And I know I respect anybody's opinion. Yeah, and you all guys know how I feel about things, and mine is just an opinion. But I mean, and I don't know if I agree with all this, but glyphs are made with the wood, the structures, the kind of shelters, what people call shelters, this tree knocking, the tree pushovers, the twisting. But for some reason, we've really pushed, wood and Bigfoot together. Although I've never seen any evidence. I've never even been in the woods in America. I wouldn't even know. But it's not like they're living out there. It's not like tree houses, or these structures aren't places where they live. They don't look like somewhere where they could even fit into, half of them. What is it with the wood?
I wonder if it's just people associating, primitive human, if this is a primate, if this is some sort of evolutionary branch of the tree, that they would be very much like cavemen. So they're going to make rudimentary structures. They're going to use rudimentary tools. They're going to put glyphs on the ground, or and again, I've seen so many pictures of glyphs, and most of them just look like random tree, branches falling into a random pattern. And the human being wants to kind of see evidence of Bigfoot, because they're into Bigfoot, and they're just going to look, and every tree that has a broken branch or every weird, collection of branches on the ground is going to be Bigfoot. And I'm not saying it's not, but I think, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And to just have two sticks laying on the ground and someone saying, oh, look, that's a letter A, they're trying to communicate with us. And it's like, well, no, maybe it's just two sticks that fell. You need more evidence than that to say definitively that this is a Bigfoot. And again, unless you're seeing some really big structure that was clearly made with intelligence, you have to throw it out and just say it's probably random. And even then, you have to say, well, again, is this hunters coming in here and building a shelter? Is this people just trying to hope? Because they know that you can go online now and find out, like, oh, this is a Bigfoot hotspot. Me and my buddies are going to go in this weekend and build this crazy looking structure. And then next weekend, people are going to go out there and be like, oh my God, there's a Bigfoot house or a Bigfoot nest. And you got to take it all with a grain of salt. You have to take it all with a grain of salt. And
Yeah.
That's why for me, it's much more interesting to hear about actual interactions with a creature versus the glyphs or the tree knock, or because you can't really associate that with something like Bigfoot. You have to sort of say, I saw a hairy humanoid. That is much more interesting to me than I saw a glyph on the ground, because the glyph can be anything. And it's probably nothing.
Yeah. And it's the same with the blurry pictures, or I've a big thing with this is people who will go out and video and then come back home and watch the video and find something in the video, and they can never go back. They'll never check that place again to see if something was there, then or now. I think we really need to, up the bar on what we class as evidence. Unless there's a story with the image, unless you actually saw, like you say, unless you saw something and tried to take a picture and you've got some context with it, that's the important thing, I think. We're really lost with stories that are not, or images that really don't fit in the pot. And that's why this is so messed up, this kind of subject. I've kind of said that if we stripped it back, really, what do we know for fact?
Yeah, not much. And it's really because we've, the community, the Bigfoot community, enthusiasts, researchers, whoever you want to throw in there, we've jumped to conclusions. And yeah, every tree knock, that's Bigfoot. Every tree break, that's Bigfoot. Every howl is a Bigfoot. And yeah, those photos drive me nuts, where people will take a picture of the woods and there's some dark area between two trees and people draw a red circle around it and they enhance the image and they draw the eyes on it. And, oh, look, there's 6 of them back there, and here's a juvenile, and here's the mother, and here's the dad, and here's the grandfather. If you have to look that hard to see, it's not there. And I can't say that there's a Bigfoot there or not, but if you have to enhance it and put red circles around it, it's not good evidence. It doesn't mean there's no Bigfoot there. I can't say for sure. Maybe there is one hiding there. I don't know, but it doesn't make for good evidence. And
No.
I understand people's desire to believe. And, me personally, I would rather have uninteresting truth than to deceive myself and believe something that's not there. So again, my experience is if someone's came to me and said, hey, we were up on that ridge the night before, it was me and my buddies, and we had a little amplifier and a microphone and we were just howling, I'd say, okay, it wasn't anything interesting. It was, now I have an explanation for it. I'd rather that than convince myself that it was a Bigfoot and go through life fooled.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the uninteresting truth.
I often say this because I love, I like birds, like taking photos of birds. And I've been in some groups, bird photography groups. And if I was to just submit a picture of a really tree full of leaves and branches and go, look, if you just look behind that branch and the third leaf up, you can just see the tail. They'd be like, what are you doing? Like, get out of here. It just wouldn't cut it, and yet we seem to accept these pictures in the Bigfoot world that are just not, you're not really seeing what it is. It wouldn't be accepted anywhere else. And yet people really want to try and, believe these pictures. I'm not saying they're true or not, but, you need more. You need more, than just that.
Yeah. And
I can't see it. It's not good enough.
I think people are just frustrated with the lack of evidence, especially people who've had encounters. And they just want to grasp onto something because they've seen it and they know it's out there, and they want other people. They don't want the ridicule. They don't want the skeptics. They don't want to have people disbelieve them. So they're going to look at every photo now and say, no, there's a Bigfoot. There's a Bigfoot. We have to accept this. And, for my money, the only really good evidence of Bigfoot is the Patterson-Gimlin footage. If you want to talk about, video evidence or photographic evidence, and that's one of those things where it's extremely clear that it's one of two things. It's either the world's greatest hoax, or it is absolute 100% proof of Bigfoot. There's no middle ground there. It's either a perfect hoax or it's actually Bigfoot. And no suit has ever shown up. No receipts have ever shown up. Nobody's ever come forward. I've said this on my show before that Bob Gimlin could make $1 billion selling his story saying, yeah, this is how we faked it. but he's going around to these conventions, not really making a lot of money, but he could feed his family for generations by selling the movie rights or the book rights to say, here's exactly how we faked it.
Yeah.
And,
I think another good video is the Mississippi skunk ape. That's pretty compelling, I think.
It is, yeah.
Ripping that tree the way it is. I mean, wood's tough, isn't it? Can't imagine a human ripping that off like that.
No, and my thing is, so many things could be hoaxed. And I'm not even saying the Patterson Gimlin film is not a hoax. I just feel like for the time, it would have been super hard for it to be hoaxed. And you would have thought that at some point, someone would have come forward with some credibility. I know some people have come forward and said, I'm the guy in the suit. And it's like, well, prove it. No, I can't. I'm just saying it, and it's like, well, then that's not proof. And yeah, so that the skunk ape footage is great too. And it could be hoaxed. And that's another one where it's like, yeah, it's clearly either a very good hoax or it's a real animal doing this. And we have to sort of, like you said, have higher standards for our evidence of Bigfoot, whether it's footprints or photographs. We can't just blindly accept a blurry photo and say, oh yeah, it's Bigfoot and it's carrying a baby on its back. And we don't know, it's a dark blob on a photo, there's no definition, there's no movement. So yeah, we have to be real careful and we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, because then, the Bigfoot community says, why doesn't science take us seriously? And it's like you said, if you submitted a photo of a branch and said, if you look really close and behind this leaf, there's the bird. No, show us a clear picture, show us something, and we need to be held to that standard as well.
Definitely. Glenn asks or mentions, I don't know, what couldn't happen is the twisted trees of huge size that takes your hands, your thoughts. Well, if you tune in on the 21st, we've got Shane and Randy Harrington coming on. They're going to talk about twisted trees. So some stuff can happen naturally. I think it's when some damage is done to a tree and it'll grow and it'll start to twist. But I know what you're saying. There are some fresh green twists on trees, and it is fascinating. I've been talking to some guys. I was obviously, a lot of people know I was ill with in hospital, and I've been going to the gym to try and build up some muscle and some strength. And the guys I'm training with are or were, one of them was an Olympian weightlifter. So he's into muscles and stuff like that. And I described to him once, I'm going to get him on the show actually, because we had a fascinating, because I'm fascinated about the biomechanics and the muscle and all that. And I said that I've heard a couple of descriptions where the person has said that the forearm is bigger than the upper arm, huge. And I said to him, how do you get those big muscles on your forearms, And he said, by twisting things. So who knows? Maybe that is something that they do, and maybe that's how their muscles are so huge on the forearms. Who knows? But I'm interested in the biomechanics of these things and how they're carrying around all that weight. And muscles are a huge factor.
Yeah, and the tree twists are much, Glenn raises a good question, because the twists are very different. You have these tree breaks where a branch will break and people say, oh, look, it's a branch and it's 8 feet high, and no human being could have reached up and pulled it down. There's lots of things that can cause that. You get snow load, you get other branches falling from other trees and knocking it down. Ice, there's all sorts of things that could make a branch break, like a clean break or a snap. But to see, when you get these branches that are twisted, that's much harder to explain. And again, there probably are some natural causes that can do that, but I don't know of many. I mean, maybe a tornado, really severe wind, but to have like a really thick branch that's twisted, and like you said, like the inside is still fresh wood, it's green and it's living wood. that takes tremendous strength. And, I can't imagine the wind strength that would take to twist that. And again, maybe there's some weird natural phenomenon that we're not aware of yet, something preternatural that is fully natural and common, and we just don't know about it because we haven't studied it or seen it because it's rare. But those are much more interesting to me than like tree breaks where you just have a branch that's been snapped, because that could be
anything,
any number of things. And again, the simplest explanation is usually the correct one. So snow load is usually the cause of that. You get too much snow and ice on a branch and it gets really heavy and it just collapses. But snow is not going to twist a branch and curl it and, living wood. So that is much more interesting to me. And again, I can't say it's definitely Bigfoot, but push it more into that realm and say, yeah, we have to look at that.
Yeah. And this is the thing about this subject is because there isn't any experts on Bigfoot, but there's lots of experts out there that can tell you about trees. There's experts that can tell you about mussel. There's experts that can tell you about all sorts that we might be able to learn a little bit more, or at least, inform ourselves of like, actually that's nature, or this is that. We do have to sort of branch out and ask different people their opinions, because there is, more often than not, a reason why things are happening. And it's when you find that one where there is no reason why that should be happening, we can go, it's probably Bigfoot. I mean, I don't know. It'd be nice if that's how it all worked out. But it would be nice to narrow it down, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's really all we have at this point. We don't have a creature that we can capture and tag and follow and put in a zoo and observe. At this point, we're really dealing with process of elimination. So you're saying, okay, we have an experience. Let's rule out certain things. We can't, if you run into a bear, you can say, okay, that was definitely a bear. Or a deer. You shoot a deer and the deer dies, and you say, okay, this is definitely a deer. You see a Bigfoot, now you got to do the process of elimination. Well, was it a bear? Well, there's only black bear here, and the tallest black bear get are about 6 feet tall. So if you saw something that was 9 feet tall, probably wasn't a bear. Was it a moose? And I'm just using my own example here, but there's tons of them. Moose don't really go out at night. They'd be tripping and stumbling. And was it a bobcat? This thing was too high up in the tree, and we would have heard it kind of scrambling. We probably would have seen the claws like wrapped around the tree. So you do this process of elimination, and again, it doesn't mean that it definitely was Bigfoot, but you can sort of say, okay, well, it wasn't a person, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a deer. What was it? So you're just left with this question mark. And at that point, you can say, well, maybe it was a Bigfoot because we've eliminated everything else. Again, if you're shooting something, it's not a guy in a gorilla suit. It's not a guy in a ghillie suit, because that guy would have dropped dead. You got a shotgun and you're shooting this thing in the chest. It's gonna drop dead if that's a man in a suit. So you can eliminate that. And that's what we really need to do, is just sort of drill down and say, not what is this, but what is it not? What can't this be? It can't be a deer. It can't be this. It can't be a person. So what are we left with? Once you've eliminated all of the possibilities, whatever's left, however improbable, has to be it.
Yeah. In a perfect world.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to happen, isn't it? Well, look, Jason, we've come to the end of the hour. We're going to have you back,
awesome,
because we've barely scratched the surface, really.
Yeah.
But it's been great talking to you. I've just put a link in the description, and there's also a link now in the chat. Guys, go over to Jason's channel. Go and check him out. We've got quite a few. You've got a few videos up, haven't you, already?
Yeah, we've been around. We got 20. I think we just put the 27th one up today. So we've been around for about 6 months.
Yeah, you've had some good guests on. I've checked out a couple of your videos,
Thank you.
2 or 3 videos at least, and you've I like them, and I like the way you're hosting and the way the conversations go. So guys, please go and check out Jason's channel and show a bit of support. So we're back here tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Central. Got James Bobo Fay coming on. Should be a good night. Thanks for everyone turning up tonight. It's been good to see you all. Even Joyce Hartman, greetings from Washington. Thanks for joining, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Take care now. Bye-bye.